Hi, good evening. Today is Monday, August 24th, 2020, and this is Dike-Anukam here in Carson City, Nevada. Well, I have chosen this setting this evening, or late this evening, to more or less report on night one of the Republican National Committee convention, live from Charlotte, or at least live from Charlotte, based in Charlotte, Washington, D.C., and all over the country tonight. Let's do a quick recap report as I did for the Democratic National Convention. And tonight's convention, or night one of the convention, really didn't have a lot of Nevada-centric focuses or issues, except for the roll call, where the Nevada delegation, which this year, due to the coronavirus issues and social distancing guidelines put in place by the North Carolina governor, limited the number of the Nevada delegation and other delegations to the RNC this year. But the Nevada delegation pledged their 25 delegates in the roll call vote today, formally giving current incumbent President Donald J. Trump the official renomination for another 4 years as the Republican Party nominee. So that was kind of the first big thing this morning, or this afternoon, for the convention, which I'm going to go ahead and apologize ahead of time today why I wasn't so on top of reports. I had a bit of a medical issue to take care of this morning, so I'm kind of a little late on the jump start today, and hence why I'm doing this report a little later than I would have wanted to. Preferably wanted to do it in Reno, but again, figured this would be the best setting to set the tone of a national event. So again, Nevada, and that announcement was made, or at least that delegation pledge was made by the Nevada Republican Party Chairman Michael McDonald during the roll call vote this morning. Then, and just a little trivia tidbit for Mr. Trump to win the Republican nomination this year, he had to get 1,276. He was able to succeed in getting way more than that in the delegation by the National Party. I think it was somewhere around basically a mass majority of those of the votes from the committee, or with the delegate committee, as he, for the most part, in the first major contest, ran unopposed up until I believe he did have three opponents. One former Libertarian vice presidential candidate William Weld, and former Massachusetts Governor William Weld. And second, he had former Illinois Congressman Joe Walsh as another opponent in the contest, who dropped out actually shortly after Iowa and New Hampshire this contest. So just a little point of reference, so you know. And President Trump did give a speech today, which is unique for a sitting president or a presumptive nominee to speak on night one or before his or her nomination speech on usually the last night. So he did speak tonight in Charlotte, or this afternoon in Charlotte, to the Republican National Committee, or at least the delegations assembled in Charlotte today. He gave a 52-minute speech. One of the major points of his speech was in Charlotte, after claiming the nomination by his party, was touting his economic record, talking about where his position stood on the COVID crisis and the administration's position and current ongoing efforts in what they're doing on that. And the big message, and I think the overall message that the president was trying to sell to the party faithful, and I think to the nation at large, and I quote, is the best employment numbers before the pandemic. So again, the argument the president's team and the argument the president's campaign is making at this time, to the nation, namely the party faithful, is that I built the economy beforehand. I can rebuild it again. I had great numbers before the COVID crisis occurred. So the situation doesn't necessarily dictate my performance presently, which that will be, I guess, the argument that he may present to the voters in November. But that was kind of the gist of his speech, which, depending upon what side of the fence you were on, watching national commentary of the speech this morning in Charlotte, had a range of opinions, from obviously supportive if you're in agreement with the president, to possibly derisive, possibly negative, if not dark, if not negative, because he did raise up the issues, campaign themes, namely of, law and order, the fact that electing his opponent, Joe Biden, the now Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, and Vice President and Vice Presidential nominee, Senator Kamala Harris, would possibly bring chaos and et cetera, et cetera. But those were kind of the commentary, it's kind of part of the speeches that, depending upon who you were listening to, was raised in tonight's conversation, or tonight's commentary. So I'm going to swing back home again to Nevada. The Nevada Democrats, in contrast, is kind of to oppose to the president's speech this afternoon. Two prominent Nevada Democrats, both Latinas, legislators from down the way, Senator Yvonne Cancela from Las Vegas and Assemblywoman Selena Torres, along with two members of the community, held a press conference call earlier in the day, about the same time as the speech was going on, to contrast the president's record locally, to kind of try to set a bit of a local narrative in regards to where the administration's position has been towards Latino families, trying to hit at a core constituency that the Democratic coalition needs going into November, and that's been more or less a focus point since 2016, from the issues of the immigration, the border wall, DACA recipients, and whatnot, and the economy as well. But that was I wasn't on that call because unfortunately I was kind of recuperating from surgery at that point. I do want to kind of circle back to the events in Charlotte. Before the president took his renomination call, Vice President Pence also spoke as well. So that's another two factors of this year's first day one, which were not usual to have the nominate both the VP nominee or the VP Vice President and the presidential nominee speak before their nomination speech on day 4. So interesting point of reference. Going into night one. So night one begins around 6 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, about 9 o'clock Eastern. It was about a 2.5 hour presentation. I have to apologize secondly because I was kind of, again, recuperating from the medical procedure this morning and didn't exactly have my notes ready to go to kind of give you a rundown of who spoke when and what, so I didn't have a logistical plan of that. But here's how it ran down. I'm going to take my handy dandy pen out and sort of hit the mic here to kind of keep track. So, night one, Turning Points America President and Chairman Charlie Kirk, who I've interviewed in Reno, who started his Culture War speech tour at UNR, was the first speaker up to set the tone of night one, which is a prominent role for a very prominent and interesting political figure like himself to get that stage. Morales spoke in support of the president, obviously, and kind of hammering home a bit of the combination of the culture war themes of his speaking tour, but also, arguing why President Trump should be reelected and why he's essentially calling him the best bodyguard for America, so to speak. Then former Majority Whip and Minority Whip Steve Scalise of Louisiana, who was injured in an assault, or injured in a gunfire, injured by gunfire, or what am I trying to say? He was shot during a congressional baseball game that nearly almost disabled him and kind of has forced him to walk the cane for a bit. Spoke in support of the president as well, and arguing making the case for President Trump from the legislative side. Notable because he is a major Republican bigwig and a major Republican heavyweight to speak on night one. Then RNC, the Republican Party Chairwoman Ron McDaniel spoke, kind of making the case to kind of suburbanite Americans and middle Americans to why they should support Donald Trump for re-election, and made a kind of unique pitch on the fact you consider yourself a housewife in that to appeal to that base, which again, depending upon who you spoke to and who you're watching tonight, may have gained some derision or some ridicule on that, because she is the chairman of the Republican National Committee, but she does hold a very prominent role, and is still someone you should still holds a prominent role in the party. And despite her pitch tonight, that is her background. She is a mom. She's also, I think, the related to U.S. Senator Mitt Romney in a distant manner, just to add some point of context. But just want to add that little tidbit there, not trying to deride the chairwoman's comments, but that was her pitch to the country tonight. Then you kind of, depending upon the McCluskey family, or the McCluskey couple, who were featured notable for a confrontation that occurred in St. Louis, Missouri, when a line of protesters came into a gated neighborhood in front of their house, namely, to basically try to protest the mayor of St. Louis for her decision or statement she'd made about the BML movement in St. Louis, and apparently were famously featured holding an AR-15 and a handgun on their front lawn, and it ended up kind of getting felony charges filed against them, were featured in the speech as well. That came with great amounts of controversy tonight, from depending upon what network you watched or degree of support. But they're making the case of why why Donald Trump should be reelected, and as well as arguing, basically explaining their position a little bit of why they did what they did. Controversial for obvious reason, because of the events that had transpired around their circumstance that made them so notable. By the way, I'm just going to go back to the currency chairwoman issue. I do apologize if I may have sounded offensive on that one. I don't mean to diminish her role or her background. I just wanted to put that point of perspective. But I just want to explain that real quick, because I think I may have butchered that, so I apologize there. Then Kim Guilfoyle, wife of Donald J. Trump Jr., spoke and gave a pretty direct speech, a pretty defiant speech, if not kind of appealing to the Latino and female-based voters and throughout the country. And I think that her speech was notable because it was very proud and very direct, and kind of spoke to her background, and also her personal background, and her rise through the ranks in public life, as she was a prosecutor in San Francisco, and formerly anesthesia still wearing off. Formerly married to current California Governor Gavin Newsom, but when he was mayor of San Francisco. So she definitely made a very passionate speech, which was notable to me. Also, another notable appearance was congressional candidate Kim Klacik from Maryland, who's running in the same congressional district. She's a black congressional candidate, female candidate, running in Elijah Cummings' old district, and made a very national, and was famous because she's made some very interesting, very eye-catching ads, trying to appeal to the base, not to the base, but voters in that district, arguing, what have the Democrats done for you, war in that district, and also walking through some of the rougher parts in that neck of that district to illustrate the political failures of the opposition party that she's running against, to try to appeal to voters in that district. Gave a speech tonight. But big, and then also, I'll kind of swing on another interesting point. Georgia Representative Vernon George, who's a Democrat from Georgia, a legislator, spoke tonight in support of Donald J. Trump for re-election tonight. Notable because he's a Democratic legislator, and I think that was an interesting twist to try to appeal to a sense of bipartisanship, and also he's an African-American legislator, so it's kind of a combination of trying to appeal to multiple bases at once. You're going to notice the theme as soon as I finish wrapping up of who was up on deck tonight on night one. And then rounding out the speech tonight were the big political heavyweights of the Republican Party tonight. Former South Carolina Governor and U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley, who was considered by many a potential 2024 or 2028 presidential candidate at some point, considering she has a pretty good resume of chops, and as being a former chief executive of a state, a prominent southern state, a good economics record, and having held a foreign policy portfolio at the UN as a former UN ambassador, and during the first part of the term of the Trump administration. She gave a pretty compelling speech, and I think was unique in that it was probably maybe the closest speech you could probably would see at a Republican convention in most election years, in that it appealed to moderates to a degree, talking about her background, being the daughter of Indian immigrants, her father being a professor at HBCU, her mother being a businesswoman, dealing with racism, dealing with challenges with racism in the South, then also talking about her time as governor of South Carolina, dealing with the challenges she faced with the shooting at Mother Emanuel Church, and then also concurrently dealing with talking about her economic record and how she dealt with, how she was able to combat successfully, from her vantage point, regulations and mandates from Washington during the Obama era, and then currently talking and then making the case for Donald J. Trump for re-election as well. Noticing a theme. But then Donald J. Trump Jr. spoke, again, the son of the current incumbent, the first son of the current incumbent, from his first marriage, I believe, and spoke prominently, strongly, and very proudly, of course. Obviously, it's his dad. He's speaking in support of his dad, and pretty directly attacking the Democratic opponent, Joe Biden, on a number of issues, from economic policy, social policy, and kind of reiterating the claim that he's been in politics all these years, all this time, and hasn't done anything to advance minority populations, economic issues. What makes people think that he will succeed in the future? So that was kind of the compelling point of his case tonight. And then last but not least, another prominent South Carolinian, current incumbent, junior senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott, who was elected in, I believe, 2018, I believe, and one of the only African-American Republican, he's the only African-American Republican in the Senate Republican caucus in Washington, spoke and gave the keynote speech tonight, talking about his background, making the case to African-American voters, making the case to American voters across the board. So the base, kind of a broad pitch tonight to support Donald J. Trump on the Republican ticket across the country, talking about the core issues of economic opportunity, school choice, and business, and big support of economic policy, Republican economic policies tonight. And that was kind of the overall pitch of tonight. So just kind of a quick overview of what you could say. You could kind of assess from tonight. A lot of Republican heavyweights towards the back end of the night. Quite a few Southern Republican heavyweights kind of leading the charge tonight on night one. Another big point tonight was a lot of folks, members of the Republican coalition of color or prominence in that community. And one could levy the assessment that they are trying to make the case towards that community across the country to say, hey, to consider voting the Republican ticket this election, as a way of kind of contrasting the Democratic message last week in that the Democrats were kind of alleging, or at least playing the card, that the Republicans are homogeneous, not very diverse, and not willing to build that coalition wider and appealing to a narrow base. So arguably there was definitely a message trying to change the narrative on messaging tonight from the Republican National Committee and the president's campaign to try to show, hey, broad base, wide range of people of color from all over the country. We're not what the other guys are saying, so to speak. That's kind of the narrative one could assess from that. I'll let you kind of decide if you want to watch the video yourself. So that's kind of my quick recap here, at least my semi-quick recap after recovering from a procedure, having a little bit of anesthesia tonight on the Republican National Committee night one. I'm going to quickly run through this real quick to save you a little trouble. So if you're interested in what might happen for night two. So night two, the Republican National Committee convention tomorrow tomorrow night will feature First Lady Melania Trump, which will be giving her speech in the Rose Garden, the newly redone Rose Garden. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will be speaking as well. Senator Rand Paul, Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, Florida Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunes, Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron, former Attorney General Pat Bondi, former Florida Attorney General Pat Bondi, and she was also one of the lead defense attorneys or one of the lead counsels during President Trump's impeachment trial for President Trump. A couple other social major Republican and social and cultural icons will be speaking as well. Eric Trump, second son, the second line. Eric Trump, the second son of Donald Trump, will be speaking, and also he is currently the current CEO in charge of the Trump Organization, in place of his father right now. And then last will be Tiffany Trump, who just graduated, I think, from Penn Law, or University of Pennsylvania Law, I believe. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But she just graduated from law school, I believe. She's the only lawyer in the family, which I think the president made mention of that being a kind of point of pride recently. So that's what's up tonight, so you could say, as the clock turns midnight here in Nevada. So that's night two to look forward to. I believe their broadcast again starts at 5:36 tonight, Pacific Standard Time, 8 o'clock Eastern. And then, again, kind of quick highlights again for night three. President Mike Pence will be speaking with excuse me, that was rude to me. With Second Lady Karen Pence, U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee, and Joni Ernst from Iowa. Joni Ernst is up for re-election right now this cycle. South Dakota Governor Kristen Noem. Several Congress people from across the country, from Texas, New York State, and two from New York State. Kellyanne Conway and Laura Trump will be speaking on Wednesday night. So that's a little bit of night three, and that's kind of what I've got for you now. So this little heads up for the next couple of nights before the big speech on Thursday, where the president gives his full acceptance speech, or his second acceptance speech, or primetime speech on Thursday night. So, tried my best to try to nail that down the best I could. Here I am. Thanks for enduring my conversation tonight, as night one of the Republican National Convention has closed several hours ago, or was completed, and look forward to night two. I'll probably do my report in Reno. That's all I got for you. Have a good night. Take care.